The silence of deep space surrounded Zelthar as he drifted among the stars. His four-fingered hand trembled as he recorded what he believed would be his final log entry. The blue-tinged skin on his elongated face had grown pale from the dropping temperature inside his small research vessel. This is Senior Researcher Zelthar of the Nebulan Science Academy. The ship's life support systems are failing. Oxygen levels will be critical in approximately 6 hours. Navigation and propulsion are offline. My distress beacon is active, but in this remote region, rescue is unlikely. He paused, his large eyes blinking slowly as he looked out the viewport at the endless void. A bitter laugh escaped his thin lips. I should be honest in these final hours. This was not an accident. Commander Vexnar deliberately damaged my ship and abandoned me here. My crime? I questioned our doctrine of superiority. Zelthar's research on comparative species intelligence had led him to a forbidden conclusion. Humans, those emotional bipeds from the outer rim, displayed cognitive abilities and social complexities that rivaled those of the Vosarians. Such thoughts were considered dangerous heresy in the Nebulan collective. The ship's computer beeped a warning. The temperature had dropped another 2 degrees. Zelthar wrapped the thermal blanket tighter around his shoulders. For the record, I do not regret my research. The evidence speaks for itself. Humans may lack our telepathic abilities and lifespans, but their capacity for innovation, adaptation, and yes, even compassion, suggests they are not the primitives we have labeled them. His breath now formed small clouds in the increasingly cold air of the cabin. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the walls of the small vessel. Zelthar had spent the last 3 hours trying to repair the communications array, but Commander Vexnar had been thorough in his sabotage. Zelthar moved to the ship's small laboratory area. His specimens and data files were still intact. He ran his fingers across the display screen, bringing up images of human settlements, artwork, and technology. For years, the collective had dismissed humans as barely sentient, dangerous because of their unpredictability and emotions. Zelthar had begun to see those same traits as strengths. A sharp pain in his chest reminded him that the oxygen was thinning. The ship's filtration system was struggling to maintain breathable air. He estimated he had maybe 5 hours left, not the 6 the computer predicted. Vosarian physiology required higher oxygen levels than many species. I wonder if humans would have abandoned one of their own over an idea, he mused aloud, his voice growing raspy. From my studies of their history, they often fought over beliefs, but they also celebrated those who challenged established thinking. He moved back to the viewport and gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the Cygnus arm, was the human territory. He had never visited their worlds, had only studied them from afar through intercepted communications and the limited, official exchanges between their governments. The ship creaked as the hull contracted in the cold of space. Another warning light blinked on the console. The backup power cells were now failing faster than expected. Zelthar felt a moment of panic before his scientific training took over. He could extend his survival by entering a meditative state, to slow his metabolism, but it would only buy him an extra hour or 2. Perhaps it is fitting, he said to the empty cabin. My people pride themselves on logic and reason, yet they fear ideas that challenge their view of the universe. Is that not the opposite of scientific thought? Zelthar made his way to the storage compartment and retrieved the emergency rations. The food would do him little good if he couldn't breathe, but his body craved energy as it fought against the cold. The bland nutrient bar tasted like dust in his mouth. As he ate, his mind drifted to the family he would never see again. His mate, Selra, would be told he died in an unfortunate accident while conducting research in an unstable region. His young offspring would grow up believing their parent was careless, not that he was murdered for his ideas. The thought brought a wave of anger that surprised him with its intensity. The ship's computer suddenly chimed, a different tone than the warning alerts. Zelthar moved quickly to the console, nearly tripping in his weakened state. Proximity alert. Unknown vessel detected at range 70,000 units and closing. Hope flared in his chest. Had the Academy sent someone back for him after all? No, that made no sense. Commander Vexnar would never risk his career by leaving evidence of his actions. Zelthar activated the external sensors, directing the remaining power to scan the approaching ship. The computer took several long moments to process the data. Vessel identification, human military design. Class, medium warship. The air seemed to freeze in Zelthar's lungs, and not from the failing life support. Humans, here, in this empty region of space, far from their normal patrol routes. It was both his worst fear and his only hope. Relations between humans and the collective were cold at best, hostile at worst. There had been no direct conflicts, but decades of mistrust and minor territorial disputes had created a tense situation. If the human ship detected his vessel, would they stop to investigate or simply destroy a potential threat? Zelthar's hands moved across the console, redirecting power to the emergency beacon. The standard distress signal used across known space might attract their attention, but it would also identify his ship as Vosarian. Would humans rescue an alien they considered an enemy? His research suggested they might. Unlike the collective, which prized species purity and separation, humans had a peculiar tendency to render aid regardless of the recipient's identity. They called it common decency, or sometimes the law of the sea, an ancient code from when they traveled only their world's oceans. The proximity alert sounded again. The human ship had altered course. They were heading directly toward his vessel. Zelthar felt a mix of fear and fascination. If they rescued him, he would be the first Vosarian to have direct prolonged contact with humans in nearly 3 decades. The scientific opportunity was unprecedented. If they destroyed him or left him to die, well, he was already counting his final hours. He opened a channel on all frequencies broadcasting in the standard galactic trade language. This is Senior Researcher Zelthar of the Nebulon Science Academy. My vessel is damaged, and life support is failing. I request emergency assistance. He waited, counting his shallow breaths in the thinning air. Would they respond? Would they care? The communications system crackled to life. A human voice, translated by his computer into Vosarian, filled the cabin. Vosarian vessel, this is Captain Samantha Boyd of the United Earthship Dauntless. We have received your distress call and are moving to assist. Stand by. Zelthar stared at the speaker in disbelief. They were coming to help. Humans, the supposedly primitive emotional beings his people dismissed, were coming to save him when his own kind had left him to die. As the human warship grew closer, visible now as more than just a point of light through his viewport, Zelthar felt something unexpected. Shame. Shame that he had ever believed his people's lies about human inferiority. And something else. Something that felt strangely like hope. Captain Samantha Boyd stood on the bridge of the UES Dauntless, her eyes fixed on the main view screen. The damaged Vosarian vessel looked small and fragile against the backdrop of stars. It drifted slowly, its hull marked with scorch patterns that suggested deliberate damage rather than an accident. Status report, she said, her voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Greg Martinez, her first officer, looked up from his console. The alien vessel's life support is critical. Oxygen levels at 17% and dropping. Temperature inside the cabin is well below what we believe is comfortable for Vosarian physiology. How long? Boyd asked. The alien has maybe 3 hours left. Maybe less. Boyd nodded, her mind already working through the options. Regulations were clear about contact with Vosarian ships. The diplomatic situation between humans and the Nebulon Collective had been tense for decades. Direct interference could be seen as an act of aggression, but leaving someone to die when they could help went against everything she believed in. Prepare a rescue team, she ordered. Environmental suits, medical staff on standby. Martinez frowned. Captain, I should remind you that contact protocols are superseded by interstellar rescue laws, Boyd finished for him. We're not starting a war, Lieutenant. We're saving a life. In the medical bay, Dr. Ben Russell prepared his equipment with quick, efficient movements. He had studied xenobiology, but Vosarian physiology was still largely unknown to human medicine. Most of what he knew came from theoretical papers and limited official exchanges between their governments. "What do we know about their medical needs?" asked Nurse Kelly Reyes as she organized supplies. "They breathe oxygen but require higher concentrations than humans," Russell explained. "Their blood is copper-based, not iron like ours. Body temperature runs cooler than ours. Beyond that, we'll have to adapt as we go." The ship's engineer, Alicia Powell, entered the medical bay with a portable life support unit. "I modified this to match Vosarian requirements," she said. "It should stabilize them long enough for transport." Russell nodded his thanks. "Let's hope it works. We don't get many chances to practice on alien patients." In the launch bay, Security Officer Dustin Carter checked his team's equipment one last time. The boarding party would consist of himself, Dr. Russell, and 2 security personnel. All wore environmental suits as a precaution, both for their protection and to avoid exposing the Vosarian to human pathogens. "Remember," Carter told his team, "we're there to help, but stay alert. We don't know why this ship was damaged or if there are other Vosarians aboard." Captain Boyd's voice came through the communication system. "Boarding team, you're cleared to launch. The alien vessel is not responding to further communications. The occupant may be unconscious." "Understood, Captain," Carter replied. "We're moving out." The small shuttle detached from the Dauntless and crossed the void to the damaged Vosarian ship. Through the viewport, Carter could see the extent of the damage, precision hits to the propulsion and communication systems. This was no accident. The shuttle docked with the alien vessel's emergency airlock. The team cycled through and entered the ship, their helmet lights cutting through the dim emergency lighting inside. The air was thin and bitterly cold. Frost had formed on the interior surfaces. The team moved carefully through the narrow corridors until they reached the main cabin. Zelthar lay slumped over his console, barely conscious. His blue-tinged skin had taken on a gray pallor, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Dr. Russell rushed forward, medical scanner in hand. "He's alive, but barely. Severe hypothermia and oxygen deprivation." He attached the portable life support unit to Zelthar's suit, adjusting the settings to increase oxygen flow. The Vosarian's eyes fluttered open at the sudden influx of breathable air. Zelthar stared at the strange figures in their environmental suits. Humans. He had seen images, of course, but never in person. Their forms were bulkier than he had expected, though that might be the suits. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Save my research." Carter looked around the cabin, noticing the organized data storage units near what appeared to be a laboratory setup. "What's he saying?" Dr. Russell adjusted his translator. "Something about his research. He wants us to take it with him." "Check it," Carter ordered one of his team members. "Could tell us why he was abandoned out here." While the doctor stabilized, Zelthar for transport, the security team examined the ship. One of them accessed the ship's logs and downloaded them to a portable device. "Sir," she called to Carter, "you should see this." According to these logs, this wasn't an accident. His own commander sabotaged the ship and left him to die. Carter frowned inside his helmet. "Why?" She continued reading. "Seems our friend here had some controversial ideas about humans, said we might be," she paused, surprised, "equals to Vosarians. Apparently that's heresy in their culture. Dr. Russell had Zelthar secured on a stretcher. We need to move now. His condition is stabilizing with the oxygen, but his core temperature is dangerously low." They gathered the research materials Zelthar had indicated and began the careful process of moving him to the shuttle. The Vosarian was conscious enough to watch them, his large eyes following their movements with a mixture of fear and fascination. Back on the Dauntless, Captain Boyd received the boarding team's report with growing concern. A deliberate attempt to murder a scientist for research findings had serious implications. If the Nebulan Collective discovered that humans had rescued Zelthar and possessed his research, it could escalate tensions between their species. The shuttle docked, and medical teams rushed Zelthar to the prepared isolation room in the medical bay. Dr. Russell worked quickly to treat the hypothermia while monitoring for any unexpected reactions to human medical technology. Captain Boyd entered the medical bay as Dr. Russell finished his initial treatment. How is our guest? She asked. Stable for now, Russell replied. The oxygen and warmth are helping. I've administered fluids and nutrients compatible with his physiology. He should regain full consciousness soon. I need to know what we're dealing with here, Doctor. Why would his people try to kill him over research about humans? Russell shook his head. I don't know yet, but his research data might tell us more. In the isolation room, Zelthar lay on a bed designed for human patients but modified for his comfort. The air was rich with oxygen, and warmth gradually returned to his limbs. Through the fog of near death and recovery, one thought kept circling. In his mind, humans had saved him. The very beings his people dismissed as inferior had risked their safety to rescue a stranger. An alien, an enemy. His research had suggested this capacity for compassion, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. As consciousness fully returned, Zelthar opened his eyes to see a human face watching him through a transparent barrier. Captain Boyd studied the alien with intense curiosity, wondering what secrets he carried and what her decision to rescue him might mean for human-Vosarian relations. For better or worse, the UES Dauntless had just changed the course of interstellar diplomacy, and neither species would ever be the same. Zelthar woke to the steady beep of medical equipment. The air felt rich and warm against his skin. For a moment he thought he had been rescued by his own people, that Commander Vexnar had changed his mind. Then he saw the unfamiliar design of the ceiling and walls. The memories rushed back. Humans had saved him. He tried to sit up and found he was stronger than expected. The treatment had worked quickly. A movement caught his eye, and he turned to see a human watching him through a transparent barrier. A female, he thought, based on his research. Hello, said Dr. Russell, his voice coming through a speaker. I'm Dr. Ben Russell. You're aboard the UES Dauntless. Do you understand me? Zelthar nodded. Yes. Your translator works well. His voice sounded strange through the human device. Thank you for saving my life. You're welcome, Russell replied with a small smile. How are you feeling? Better. Your medical technology is impressive. Zelthar looked around the isolation room. It was clearly designed for humans but had been modified for his comfort. The temperature and oxygen levels were perfect for Vosarian physiology. We did our best with limited knowledge of your species, Russell said. Captain Boyd would like to speak with you when you're ready. Zelthar felt a flutter of nervousness. The captain of a human warship. In all recorded history, no Vosarian had ever had a direct conversation with a human military leader. I am ready now, he said, straightening his posture. A few minutes later, Captain Boyd entered the medical bay. She stood on the other side of the barrier, studying the alien with curious eyes. I am Captain Samantha Boyd. Welcome aboard the Dauntless. Zelthar lowered his head in a Vosarian gesture of respect. Senior researcher Zelthar of the Nebulan Science Academy. I owe you my life, Captain. Boyd nodded. We found evidence that your ship was deliberately sabotaged. Can you tell us what happened? Zelthar hesitated. Sharing such information with humans could be seen as treason by the collective. But these humans had saved him when his own commander had tried to kill him. My research became problematic for certain leaders in the collective, he explained. I study comparative species intelligence. My findings about humans contradicted official doctrine. What findings? Boyd asked. That humans are far more advanced, both technologically and socially, than my people have been led to believe. That your capacity for innovation, adaptation, and compassion suggest humans might be evolutionary equals to Vosarians. Boyd raised an eyebrow. That got you left to die in space? The collective maintains its power through the belief in Vosarian superiority, Zelthar said. My commander, Vexnar, is especially dedicated to this ideology. When he discovered my conclusions, he arranged this accident. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Lieutenant Martinez and Communications Officer Eric Johnson monitored long-range scanners and communications channels. Captain Boyd needs to know this, Martinez said, reviewing the latest intercepts. The Vossarians are searching for their missing ship. Johnson nodded. And based on these transmissions, they're not sending a rescue mission. They're looking to eliminate evidence. Martinez tapped his communication badge. Captain, we're picking up Vossarian communications. They're searching this sector, and it doesn't sound like they're looking to rescue their scientist. In the medical bay, Boyd received the message with a grim expression. The situation was becoming more complicated. By the minute. Zelthar, she said, turning back to the alien, your people are searching for you. Based on our intelligence, they don't plan to rescue you. Zelthar showed no surprise. They will destroy both my ship and all evidence of my research. And me, if they find me alive? What exactly is in your research that frightens them so much? Boyd asked. Evidence that the collective has been lying about humans for decades, Zelthar replied. But also evidence of something worse. While studying human colonies near our borders, I discovered signs of collective interference. Sabotage. Attacks disguised as accidents or natural disasters. Boyd's expression hardened. Are you saying the Nebulon Collective has been attacking human settlements? Not open warfare, Zelthar clarified. Subtle destabilization, making colonies fail through engineered blights, communication disruptions, supply line interference, all while maintaining peaceful diplomatic relations. In the ship's science lab, Alicia Powell and Dustin Carter reviewed the data recovered from Zelthar's vessel. These files are encrypted, Powell said, but I'm making progress. The parts I've decrypted so far support his story. Look at this. Carter leaned forward to examine the screen. It showed detailed analysis of failed human agricultural colonies on 3 border worlds. What had been reported as natural crop failures showed clear signs of artificial biological agents. This could change everything, Carter said. If the Vossarians have been secretly attacking our colonies, it would explain why so many frontier settlements have failed over the past decade, Powell finished. We need to get this to the captain. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Russell had completed further tests on Zelthar. He's recovering well, Russell told Boyd. Physically, he could leave isolation soon, but I'm concerned about his safety if his people find us. Boyd nodded. So am I. Martinez. Reports of Vossarian patrol ship has altered course toward this sector. We need to make decisions quickly. She turned to Zelthar. Your research could have serious implications for human-Vossarian relations. I need to know if you're willing to share it formally with human authorities. If you grant me protection, Zelthar said, I will share everything, my work, my findings, all of it. That would amount to requesting asylum, Boyd said carefully. It would be a diplomatic incident. I understand, Zelthar replied, but I cannot return to the collective. Not only would I face execution for heresy, but my research would be destroyed. The truth about what the collective has been doing to human colonies would be lost. Boyd considered this. Her orders were to avoid confrontation with Vossarian ships. Taking Zelthar to human space would likely lead to exactly that. But the information he carried could save countless human lives if the collective was truly behind the colony failures. I need to consult with my senior staff, she said finally. Dr. Russell will continue your treatment. Rest while you can. As Boyd left the medical bay, she found Martinez waiting for her in the corridor. Captain, the Vossarian patrol ship has changed course again. They're definitely heading this way. At current speed, they'll be in sensor range in 7 hours. Boyd took a deep breath. Call the senior staff to the briefing room. We need to make some hard choices. In the isolation room, Zelthar watched the humans through the transparent barrier. They moved with purpose, communicating efficiently, showing concern not just for their mission but for him, an alien who should be their enemy. Everything he had theorized about humans was proving true. Their adaptability, their compassion, their willingness to question and challenge, all traits the collective feared and denied. And now he faced the prospect of becoming the first Vossarian defector in recorded history. As the human ship carried him further from everything he had known, Zelthar felt something unexpected, a sense of freedom. For the first time in his life, He could pursue the truth wherever it led, if the humans would let him. The senior staff of the UES Dauntless gathered in the briefing room. Captain Boyd stood at the head of the table, her expression serious. On the display screen behind her, the path of the approaching Vosarian patrol ship was marked in red. You have approximately 6 hours before the Vosarian ship enters sensor range, Boyd began. We need to decide our course of action regarding our guest and his information. Lieutenant Martinez spoke first. Protocol is clear, Captain. We should avoid confrontation and arrange to return the researcher to his people through diplomatic channels. Dr. Russell shook his head. If we do that, we're sending him to his death. Commander Vexnar tried to kill him once already. And his research suggests the Vosarians have been attacking our colonies in secret, added Alicia Powell. That information could save lives. Dustin Carter nodded in agreement. The evidence we've recovered so far supports his claims. The biological agents used against our agricultural colonies match Vosarian technology signatures. Communications Officer Eric Johnson leaned forward. Captain, I've been monitoring their transmissions. They're not using standard search and rescue protocols. They're using military encryption, and from what I can decode, they have orders to remove all traces of the incident. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We have 3 options, Boyd said finally. 1, follow protocol and attempt to return Zelthar to his people through official channels. 2, drop him at a neutral port and let him make his own way. Or 3, grant his request for asylum and take him and his research to Earth. Option 1 would mean his death and the loss of critical intelligence, Powell said. Option 2 leaves him vulnerable and doesn't ensure his research reaches our authorities, Carter added. And Option 3 risks confrontation with a Vosarian military vessel, Martinez finished. It could be seen as an act of aggression. Boyd looked at each of her officers in turn. I want your recommendations. This isn't a vote, but I value your input. One by one, the senior staff gave their opinions. Despite the risks, the majority favored granting asylum. The evidence of Vosarian attacks on human colonies was too important to ignore. Thank you for your input, Boyd said when everyone had spoken. I'll make my decision shortly. In the meantime, Lieutenant Martinez, plot a course for the nearest Earth Alliance outpost. Dr. Russell, prepare Zelthar for possible transport out of isolation. We may need to move quickly. As the meeting ended, Boyd remained in the briefing room weighing her options. Her career, her crew, and potentially the peace between humans and Vosarians hung in the balance. In the medical bay, Zelthar had been moved from isolation to a regular bed. Dr. Russell had determined that the alien posed no biological threat to the crew. Nurse Kelly Reyes helped Zelthar adjust to his new surroundings. How are humans so different from what my people believe? Zelthar asked her as she checked his vital signs. Kelly smiled. How do you mean? The collective teaches that humans are ruled by emotions incapable of the higher logical thinking that Vosarians pride themselves on, Zelthar explained. Yet I see nothing but discipline and reason in this crew. You saved me an enemy alien without hesitation. Compassion isn't illogical, Kelly replied, and we're not enemies just because our governments don't get along. Zelthar considered this. In the collective, we are taught from birth that other species are inferior, that Vosarians alone have achieved the perfect balance of intellectual and physical development. And you question that? Kelly asked. I followed the evidence, Zelthar said simply. A true scientist cannot ignore facts that contradict their beliefs. Kelly smiled. That sounds pretty human to me. On the bridge, Eric Johnson suddenly straightened at his communications console. Captain to the bridge, he called over the ship's system. Urgent message intercepted. Boyd arrived moments later. Report. I've intercepted and decoded a message from the approaching Vosarian ship to collective headquarters, Johnson explained. They're reporting that they've detected our engine signature in this sector and are moving to investigate. They suspect we may have found Zelthar's vessel. Boyd's expression hardened. Time to contact? 5 hours, Captain, Martinez replied. From the helm. They'll be in weapons range in 6, Carter added from the tactical station. Boyd made her decision. Set course for Earth Alliance Outpost 47, maximum speed. Martinez looked up in surprise. Captain, that's a direct course toward Earth space. The Vosarian ship will interpret that as, I know what they'll think, Lieutenant, Boyd interrupted. But we're not abandoning Zelthar or his research. The evidence of collective attacks on our colonies needs to reach Alliance Command. The Vosarian ship will pursue, Carter warned. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Boyd said firmly. Mr. Johnson, prepare a message buoy with a copy of everything we've learned from Zelthar so far. If we're intercepted, we'll launch it toward Alliance space. Aye, Captain, Johnson replied, already working on the encryption. Boyd turned to Martinez. Inform Dr. Russell that Zelthar is officially under our protection. I'm granting his request. For asylum. In the medical bay, Zelthar felt the subtle shift as the ship changed course. The vibration of the engines increased, suggesting higher speed. Something had changed. Captain Boyd entered a few minutes later. Researcher Zelthar, I've come to inform you of my decision. The United Earth Alliance hereby grants your request. For asylum, we're currently en route to an Alliance outpost where you and your research will be transferred to Earth. Zelthar felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The Vosarian patrol ship? Still approaching, Boyd admitted. We're trying to outrun them to the border of Alliance space. If they catch us, they will demand you surrender me, Zelthar warned. It could lead to conflict. I'm aware of the risks, Boyd said. But the information you've provided about collective operations against our colonies is too important to ignore. Lives are at stake. Zelthar studied the human captain with new respect. You would risk war to protect the truth? We would risk confrontation to protect innocent lives, Boyd corrected. Both yours and those in our colonies who may be targeted. Next, the ship's alert system suddenly activated. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside the medical bay. Bridge to Captain Boyd. Martinez's voice came through the communication system. The Vosarian ship has increased speed. They're on an intercept course and have activated weapon systems. Acknowledged, Boyd replied. I'm on my way. She turned to Zelthar. It seems your former colleagues are determined to stop us. Captain, Zelthar said urgently, there may be a way to convince them to stand down. I know how Vosarian military commanders think. Let me help. Boyd considered this for a moment. Come with me to the bridge. As they hurried through the corridors of the Dauntless, Zelthar marveled at the efficiency of the human crew. There was no panic, no confusion, just determined action as they prepared for possible confrontation. On the bridge, all eyes turned to Zelthar as he entered with Captain Boyd. It was the first time most of the crew had seen the Vosarian in person. He stood taller than most humans, his blue-tinged skin and large eyes marking him as unmistakably alien. Status report, Boyd ordered as she took her command chair. Vosarian vessel closing, Carter replied from tactical. Their weapons are charged. They're hailing us. Boyd glanced at Zelthar, then back to her communications officer. Open a channel, Mr. Johnson. The main view screen activated, showing the stern face of a Vosarian military commander. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Zelthar standing on the bridge of the human warship. The confrontation that would decide the fate of two species was about to begin. The Vosarian commander's face filled the view screen, his expression a mixture of shock and anger at the sight of Zelthar standing freely on the bridge of a human warship. I am Commander Velkun of the Nebulan collective vessel Righteous Truth, he said, his voice cold. You have illegally taken custody of a collective citizen. Return researcher Zelthar immediately, or we will consider this an act of war. Captain Boyd stood firm. I am Captain Samantha Boyd of the United Earth ship, Dauntless. Researcher Zelthar has requested and been granted asylum under Alliance law. We found him abandoned in a damaged vessel, left to die by his own people. Velkun's eyes narrowed. The researcher suffered an unfortunate accident. We are here to bring him home for proper care. That is a lie, Zelthar said, stepping forward. Commander Vexenar deliberately sabotaged my ship on your orders, Velkun, because my research exposed the truth about the collective's operations against human colonies. Velkun's face hardened. You speak treason, Zelthar. Your mind has been affected by oxygen deprivation. Return to your people for treatment. Boyd glanced at Zelthar, then back to the screen. Commander, we have recovered and verified Zelthar's research. We know about the biological agents used against our agricultural colonies, the artificial blights, the sabotaged communication systems. For a brief moment, Velkun looked surprised before regaining his composure. Captain Boyd, you are being deceived by a disturbed mind. Zelthar was conducting unauthorized experiments that endangered his own ship. Return him to us and we can resolve this matter peacefully. Boyd shook her head. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Researcher Zelthar is under the protection of the United Earth Alliance. We are taking him and his research to Alliance authorities. Velkun's voice became dangerous. Then you leave us no choice. Return him now or we will disable your vessel and take him by force. You're outnumbered and outgunned, Commander, Boyd said calmly. Look at your tactical display. On the Vosarian ship, Velkun glanced at his scanner and felt a chill. While they had been talking, 2 more human vessels had appeared at the edge of their sensor range, patrol ships responding to the Dauntless's alert signal. Zelthar stepped closer to the view screen. Velkun, the humans know the truth now. They have evidence of the collective's actions against their colonies. Evidence I made sure would survive even if I did not. You have doomed us all, Velkun hissed. The Council believed we could weaken them slowly without open conflict. Now you have forced a confrontation we are not ready for. No, Zelthar replied firmly. I have created an opportunity for truth. The collective has been wrong about humans. They are not the emotional, irrational beings our propaganda claims. They saved me when my own people tried to kill me. They offer protection not out of weakness, but out of principle. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the crew watched this exchange, in tense silence. Lieutenant Martinez monitored the approaching Alliance patrol ships. They'll be within range in 3 minutes, Captain. Boyd nodded, then addressed the Vosarian commander again. You have a choice, Commander Velkun. You can attack this ship, starting a war your people are not prepared for, according to your own words. Or you can return to the collective with a message. What message? Velkun asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. That the time for secret attacks and deception is over, Boyd said. That we know what the collective has been doing, and we are prepared to defend our colonies openly if necessary. But we are also prepared to establish genuine diplomatic relations if the collective is willing to negotiate honestly. Zelthar watched the human captain with admiration. She offered both firmness and an open hand, a balance the collective leadership would never understand. Velkun was silent for a long moment, calculating his options. Finally, he spoke. I will take your message to the Council, Captain Boyd, but know this, they will not receive it well. Researcher Zelthar is now considered a traitor to our people. The punishment for his actions is death. Then he has found a new home among people who value truth over dogma, Boyd replied. Safe journey, Commander. The communication ended, and the view screen showed the Vosarian vessel turning away. The bridge crew let out a collective breath of relief. They're powering down weapon systems, Carter reported from Tactical. Setting course back toward collective space. Maintain yellow alert until they're out of sensor range, Boyd ordered, and welcome our escort when they arrive. She turned to Zelthar. It seems you've started something that can't be undone. The truth often has that effect, Zelthar replied quietly. 3 days later, the UES Dauntless docked at Earth Alliance Outpost 47. Zelthar stood in the observation lounge, watching as the massive space station grew larger in the viewport. It was his first glimpse of human construction on this scale, elegant and efficient, yet different from the rigid symmetry favored by Vosarian architects. Captain Boyd joined him at the viewport. Alliance intelligence officials are waiting to debrief you. They're very interested in your research. And what happens to me afterward? Zelthar asked. That depends partly on you, Boyd replied. You've been granted preliminary asylum. After debriefing, you'll be offered permanent resident status and possibly a research position if you want it. Zelthar turned to look at the human captain. You would allow me to continue my work, even after learning how my people have acted against yours? We don't judge individuals by the actions of their governments, Boyd said. Your courage in bringing us this information may save many lives. That counts for a lot. Zelthar felt an unfamiliar emotion swelling within him. Hope, mixed with something that might be freedom. In all my research on humans, the most difficult concept for me to understand was your capacity to separate the individual from the group. The collective teaches that identity exists only as part of the whole. Yet you broke from that thinking, Boyd observed. You followed evidence even when it contradicted everything you had been taught. Because truth matters more than comfort, Zelthar said. I believe humans understand this better than my people. As the ship completed its docking procedures, Zelthar gathered his courage to ask the question that had been on his mind. Captain, when the debriefing is complete, would it be possible? Would your crew be willing to teach me more about humans? Not as research subjects, but as... He hesitated, searching for the right word. As friends? Boyd suggested with a smile. Yes, Zelthar said, the alien word feeling right. As friends. I think that can be arranged, Boyd replied. Dr. Russell has already asked if you might be interested in collaborating on a paper about Vosarian physiology, and I believe Nurse Reyes mentioned something about introducing you to human literature. As they walked toward the airlock, Zelthar reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Abandoned to die in deep space by his own people, he had been saved by those he had been taught to consider enemies. In the process, he had not only found sanctuary, but perhaps something more valuable. A place where truth was valued above dogma, and where even an alien could find acceptance. Behind them, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small dramas of sentient beings. Yet among those stars, something had changed. A bridge had formed between two species built by one act of cruelty, countered by one act of compassion. And in that space between cruelty and compassion, between fear and understanding, the future would be written.